Okay, we are going to start a brand new unit today called Statistics, and some of the concepts in this unit you have seen in earlier grades, but probably not for a couple of years. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back and look at those concepts today, looking at different ways of analyzing data. Okay, and so some of these ways, again, you're very familiar with, others you haven't ever seen before. Okay, so we have two types of measures. We have measures of central tendency, and then we also have measures of dispersion. So central tendency, what these ones do is they show you how your data is clustered together. Measures of dispersion show how your data is spread out. Okay, so some of these words you've seen before, some of them you haven't. So mean, another way to think of mean is class average. So this is where you add up all the data values. Let's say if we were to take all your marks on the last test, add them up, you divide by however many of these data values there are. So if there's 20 people in class, so 20 test scores, I would divide by 20, and then the answer out is the mean or the class average. Okay, the median, this is if you take your data values and you arrange them from either smallest to largest or largest to smallest. It is the middle value. So the middle value is the median. Okay, the mode is the most, so I always think of it as mode and most. It's the most frequently occurring data value. So let's say over half the class got 70% on the last exam, then the mode would be 70 because that was the most common score that I saw. Now, one thing to note with mean, median, and mode, they're usually not equal to each other. Now, when they are equal to each other, we have something called a normal distribution, which we'll get into later on in this unit. But most of the time, they're not equal. Here's the problem with statistics. All three of these are often referred to as averages. So, usually when I hear the word average, I'm assuming it's the mean that they're referring to. But on social media and in news networks and with all this data that's come out with all of COVID and transmission rates and all that stuff, you don't actually know which one they're actually referring to, whether it be the mean, the median, or the mode. And that is one of the fundamental problems with statistics, is depending on which data value the person interpreting the data has picked, it can really skew the results, so you never really know exactly if what you're seeing is the real full picture. Okay, so we're going to calculate out mean, median, and mode and understand that there will usually be different values for each one in a regular data set. What the range is, you take your largest data value minus your smallest data value. Okay, so it's the spread. Outliers, these are any data values that don't make sense or don't fit in. So let's say almost everybody in the class gets 70% on the exam, but somebody got a 99 and somebody else got 12. So the 99 and the 12, while they're still accurate marks, that's what those students scored, they're outliers. They don't match the rest of the class. Okay. Standard deviation, this is the new one. So we will actually spend a fair bit of time talking about standard deviation. It is super important measure of dispersion for us. What it shows how clustered the data values are around the mean. So the mean, remember that's like class average, that's the most common application that we have for measures of central tendency. Remember I said they can all be referred to as average, but most people use the mean. So if most of our data values are clustered or fairly close to that mean, then that tells me as a person, let's say, who's giving the test, if most kids got around the class average, then that tells you that that was a pretty good test and that everybody's at about the same level of understanding. But if I had, let's say, a class average of 65 and everybody got between, let's say most people got between a 60 and a 70, that's a pretty good test to me. But if a class average is 65 and I've got equal numbers of kids getting 30 as I do getting 80, that's really spread out. So the class average is still a 65, but nobody actually scored even close to that. So the standard deviation really tells me that. It tells me how spread out the data values are around that mean. Okay? So like I said, we'll get much more deeper into these as we go. So here are some marks on a recent quiz. So first off, let's just make sure we count how many there are. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's 9 data values. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate out all of these except for the standard deviation, because I haven't shown you how to calculate that one yet. So for the mean, what we're going to do is we're going to add up all the data values, and then we're going to divide by 9. Now, if you want to do this in one step on your calculator, you have to put those in brackets. Okay, otherwise it's only the last number that will be divided by 9, not all of them. So I'm just going to plug this in on my calculator. Just give me a second here. And then I'm going to divide by 9. So I get out 72.6 repeating. Okay, so let's say that that was percent. So about a 73% class average. Okay. For the median now, so the median, remember, is your middle. So you can rearrange these and write them out from smallest to largest. Or what I like to do, and I'm just going to show you here how I do it, I go ahead and cross out numbers. So I go through my data value and I cross out my biggest data value, and then I cross out my smallest data value. And now I do the same thing with the numbers I have left remaining. So I cross out my largest data value and I cross out my smallest data value. And I'm just going to repeat that process. Cross out my largest data value, now my smallest data value. Okay. Oh, sorry, this was the smallest one. So this one should still be there. Let me just get my eraser on that. Okay. And now I'm going to cross out my largest data value. Now my smallest data value, and so this one's in the middle here. So the median is 71. Now, one thing to note, if you ended up with 2 numbers left, so what you would do then in this case, I was left with 1 number, so that was the median. But if let's say I had 10 data values, so let's say there was a 73, so let's say I was left with 71 and 73. If there's 2 numbers left, you take the halfway point between them. The halfway number. Okay, so if there was, let's say, a 71 and a 73 left, then 72 would have been the median. Okay. Mode is the most frequently occurring data value. Do we have a data value that occurs the most? Yes, 58. So look at these 3. Class average is 73, median is 71, mode is 58. So in terms of which one do you think is the least accurate? I'd say the 58. Okay, because almost all of these marks here are in the 70s and 60s, or actually in the 70s. So to me, the 70s are the better indicator for the average for that class. Now, for the range, we take the largest data value minus the smallest data value. And that gives me my range. So my range, so I have a 36% spread between the highest and the lowest mark. Okay. Outliers, so not every data set will have outliers, but if you do, so here I'd actually say the 94 and the 58 would be outliers. Simply because there was nothing else even close to 94, and there was nothing else even close to 58. I mean, I guess 66 is kind of close. So here's the thing. Those 4 are calculated. You will either get them right or you'll get them wrong. But outliers is more up for interpretation. Okay, so somebody might say, nah, 94 is the only outlier here. Somebody else might say, you know what? Those are all perfectly acceptable test marks. I don't see any outliers at all. Okay, so again, it's up to you how you interpret that one. And then for standard deviation, we're not going to worry about that one right now because that one's actually quite a detailed process on how we calculate it. So we'll leave that for another day. I'm just going to pause the video here and I'll be right back. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of problem solving now with the mean, median, and mode, focusing mainly on the mean. Okay, so first example here. So John wrote 6 science tests last semester. His mean mark on them was 74%. What was the sum of his test scores? So in order to calculate out the mean, we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'd add up all the 6 test scores. We'd divide by 6, and we get out his average. And his average was 74%. So it wants to know what he got on, whoops, that's not what I wanted to pick. What did he get? What was this sum? So I just want to know what the total of all those numbers would be. So this is just a little bit of algebra here. So right now I'm dividing by 6. So how do I move that divide by 6? I times by 6. So on my calculator, I'm going to go 74 times 6. So the sum of those 6 test scores is 444%. Now we don't know what he got on individually on each test, but we know that they would add up to give us 444%. Okay, next one. Jess had a mean test average of 70% in English last semester. She only had 4 tests in the course. Okay, so she had 4 tests in the course. She remembers that she got a 65, an 85, a 73, and something else. So we're going to divide that by 4, and the average is 70%. We need to find out what she got right there. So again, just a little bit of algebra here that we're going to do. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add those ones up and see what that totals out to. So again, use your calculator. So that is 223 plus something divided by 4 equals 70. So now we're going to move that divided by 4 over. So how do I do that? So I'm going to times by 4. So I've got 223 plus something is 280. And now I just have to minus that 223. So what was her last test score? Well, it was 57%. Okay, so her 4 test marks were 65, 85, 73, and 57. Now what you can do if you're not sure if you've done it right is you can go ahead and check your work by actually finding the average. So if you go 65 plus 85 plus 73 plus 57 and divide that by 4, you should get out 70% because that's what it told us in the question. And if you don't, then you know you've made a mistake somewhere. Okay, so let's look at this last question here. So it says Callie currently has an average on her 5 chem tests of 80%. So I'm just going to go 5 scores. And I would divide that by 5. And that average is 80%. Now, if she gets a 92% on the 6th test, what will her average be? Okay, so I'm just going to times both sides by 5 here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now 80 times by 5 would be 400. Okay, so that's what the sum of the 5 test scores would be. So we're going to add in a 6th test score. So we've got the sum of the 5 plus 92. Now she's got 6 test scores, and we need to know what that new average will be. So we know what the sum of the 5 is. The sum of the 5 is 400. So the sum of the 5 is 400. So I'm going to go 400 plus 92 and divide that by 6. And that gives me out 82%. So that would be her final average. Okay, so the assignment will be attached to the end of the video. As always, if you get stuck or have any questions, don't be afraid to ask.